Hey everyone, I'm John, and welcome to another installment of Video Games of Old, in which a 29-year-old man who lives in an attic whines and complains about 20-year-old video games for children that nobody cares about anymore for no good reason. This time around, we're going to look at the worst video game athlete of all time, the athletes we actually hated playing as. And before we get to this first entry, let's first take a moment and nail down the very slowest character in the history of video gaming, period. I don't know if you ever played Combat for the Atari 2600. Can you see that? Actually, I hope you can't see it. It's horrible. But yeah, you've got this tank, and he goes at about 1 centimeter per hour, and just bumps into shit all the time, and occasionally shoots something. So there you have that. The very slowest object ever. The second slowest object in the history of video gaming. Shawn Chambers, Tampa Bay Lightning. And here we have Mr. Shawn Chambers in NHLPA 93 for the Sega Genesis. EA Sports put him in this game because they hated him. We know that they hated him because they ranked him a 1 overall, and they rated him a 0 in every statistical category except for endurance and aggression. He was a very aggressive player, so he started a lot of fights, but he was a 0 in fighting, so he got his ass kicked every single time. Now, if you ever played an EA Sports game for the Sega Genesis, like I did many times, this will probably look familiar to you. You see the extra large cartridge there? Nobody really knew what it was for. They claimed it was for a bigger memory, but we all kind of figured it was a gimmick. It was not a gimmick. Actually, in the case of NHLPA Hockey 93, they had to have more physical space on account of how much programming was dedicated to the fact that Shawn Chambers was horrible. I would say the top inch of the cartridge here was just dedicated to him being this awful piece of shit. Which, don't get me wrong, he's probably a really nice guy in real life, and I bet I'd definitely shake his hand if I met him. But video game Shawn Chambers is just this horrible, shitty piece of shit. So I got curious, and I decided to try and hack into this cartridge and see what this code was all about and why Shawn Chambers was so terrible in this game. What I came across is just this massive catalog of if-then statements dictating what happens to Shawn Chambers in this game under various circumstances. Here, I can read a few to you. If Shawn Chambers attempts to skate, then Shawn Chambers falls down. If a teammate passes Shawn Chambers, then Shawn Chambers falls down. Oh, here's a long one. If, in a distant land centuries ago, a droplet of rain ran down the leaf of a ficus tree and hung on the end for just a bit before falling on the roof of a house owned by a man who sits at the table writing with quill pen by dim candlelight a letter to his wife who years ago was lost at sea, explaining to her why the Duke is laying claim to their farmstead, which had been in the family for generations, and apologizing for failing her and lamenting to her that the ways of society at some point in history had changed between the hunter-gatherer and the tax collector. They worked no longer as a means to ensure that no man went hungry, and instead began to serve as a labyrinthine prison of rules and claims to property from which mankind would never escape. And then the man put down his quill and rolled his parchment up and dropped it in a glass bottle and sealed it tightly, and he knew that the next day he would walk down to the shore and throw it into the sea. And then he sat for a moment and he thought how nice it is to post a letter to the ocean, because after all, the ocean needs no address nor postage. Then, Shawn Chambers falls down. Wow. NHLPA 93 was a great game, but these EA Sports guys back then, they were on some weird shit. Be sure to subscribe to SB Nation, and I'm supposed to tell you to read the rest of my article about awful video game athletes, including Shawn Chambers, but to be honest with you, this whole experience of playing as all these horrible athletes has sort of broken my spirit, and I don't care what you do. Do whatever you want. Be sure to subscribe, though.